Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am super excited to have you all here. Today we are going to discuss about scenario based interview questions for DR and BDR election process. Trust me, this is going to be really interesting. So without any further ado, let's get started. So before going into the core concepts, let's quickly refresh on what DR BDR election is and how actually it takes place and where actually it takes place. So in OSPF we have two kinds of network. One is a point-to-point network and other is a broadcast network. So it is divided into two types, point-to-point and one is a broadcast. Okay, so DR and BDR elections occur in a broadcast network. So what you basically do is you configure your routers to be part of area 0 and they are part of the same broadcast domain. So here you configure OSPF area 0 and call your interfaces into that particular area. Since in the same area you have multiple routers which are all part of same area, there is an DR and BDR election that takes place. Who is going to be the owner of exchanging all the routing information. DR will be the sole owner of exchanging all this information. So we'll talk about that. So to elect DR and BDR, we have a criteria. Whoever is configured with the highest router priority will be elected as DR. So, and this priority is carried in the hello packets, and to configure it on Cisco, you have to give command IPOSP a priority 1. And if you have configured a priority of 0, that router will not participate in the DR-BDR election process. Okay, and if you have configured the priority as same on all the routers, in that case we have a tiebreaker as a router ID. So what router ID is either you can manually configure it or hard code it on your router that this IP is going to be my router ID. And if you don't configure the router ID, then no problem. Ideally, a user configures a loopback IP on its the highest IP on the loopback address is taken into consideration as the router ID. Okay, and even if user has not configured a loopback on that router, the highest IP on the interface will be selected for the DR and BDR election. So for example, if you have two routers and the network is a broadcast network and you want to do a BDR DR election between these two routers, so first thing will be checked is the priority. Whoever has the highest priority will be elected as the DR and the second best will be a BDR. So in this case, since both the priorities are same, I'll go for the router ID. Whoever has the highest router ID will be elected as the DR. So router ID you can manually configure. If you have not manually configured, it will be the highest IP on the loopback interface. If you have not configured the loopback, then it will be highest IP address on the interface. That's the theory part. Let's proceed to the next slide. So let's take this topology into consideration. We have a broadcast network. All of the routers are connected via switch. All the switch port are part of the same VLAN, and you have configured OSPF on all the routers from starting from R1 to R3 and all part of area 0. Now we are going to discuss three most common use cases which are normally asked also in the interviews. So that will be case 1. As soon as you switch on all the routers, who will become the DR and BDR? Case 2. If a link to the DR fails, who will be the new DR? Failure of link to the DR, who will become the new DR? Okay, and then we have case 3 on link repair. So if you repair the link to the old DR, now who will become the DR? Okay, so to discuss this, let's check the first case. So let's assume you are starting all the topologies and switch at the same time, and all the routers who are part of a OSPF area 0 are configured with the same priorities as you can see over here. All are configured with same priorities, and then we have a router ID configured on each of them, starting from 1.1.1.1 up to 6.6.6.6. So as soon as you start all the topologies, all the devices at the same time, DRBDR election will take place and it will elect R6 as the DR in the first place. Second best RID is of R5 who will be elected as a BDR. So far so good. R4 will be elected as a DR other router. R1 will be elected as DR other router. R2 will be elected as DR other router. And R3 also will be elected as a DR other router. So this is the answer to the case 1, who is going to become the DR and BDR at the initial stage. Now let's discuss on case 2. Case 2 is when the primary link to the DR goes down. So in that case, since your DR is down, once the dead timer is going to expire, there will be a new re-election that is going to take place. But now, since we already have a BDR in the network who is not down, this BDR will straight away take up the role of a DR. And there will be a re-election for the BDR. The second best is going to be R4. So now this R4 router will become the BDR, new BDR. And this router will be a new DR. Okay, so this is the answer to the case 2. So whenever your primary DR goes down, the existing BDR takes up the role of DR, and there is a re-election for the new BDR. Whoever is the second best router ID is going to become the BDR. Now, case 3 is tricky. When this links comes up, so let's say this link has come up. So now this DR will start to exchange the hello packets. It will start to tell that, okay, I am here. So this gets really tricky. What is going to happen to the DR BDR election process? Okay, so now what will happen in OSPF? Always remember, DR and BDR is a non-preemptive election process. Once the election has taken place, once the DR and BDRs are elected, as soon as the new router ID comes up with the best IP, it is not going to preempt the existing DRs and BDRs. So answer for case 3 is R6 has come up. It will now stay as DR other. And there will be no change to the existing DRs and BDRs. So I hope this session was informative. I'll see you in the next video.